Hey guys, hanging out with Wes Gay, certified StoryBrand expert. Is that
That'll work. I've been called worse, Carl, so I'll take it.
awesome? So, man, we've seen each other in passing all over. I think this is the first IRL experience.
I think so. It's like I was telling you before we started, this event kind of feels like the internet has showed up to a degree.
Everybody that you know online is
Yeah, I
right
mean,
there
it's like I'm
standing in person. They're
seeing
right
name
here.
tags. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I've talked to you," like, but I've never met you, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, awesome. Well, man, you're doing a breakout, really kind of anchored in StoryBrand and how to do an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
How does that work into church and ministry?
Yeah, a lot of churches struggle because they don't know how to talk about what they're doing in a really clear, compelling way. For example, Christmas is coming. We're here in October. Christmas will be here in a couple of months. And so how are we gonna promote Christmas? It'll be, "Well, we've got this campaign. We'd love for you to join. If you don't join, kids won't have Christmas presents and they'll be sad." And we just guilt people into engaging, right?
Yeah.
The challenge of that is churches communicate so much stuff so often that their stuff gets lost in the noise. Combine that with churches don't pause to say, "How do we talk about this in a way that actually makes people want to engage, that makes people want to respond?" And so our session, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about 2 things. One is a framework. If you're creating, let's say, a giving campaign or some bigger thing, how do you communicate that at a broader level? And I'm also gonna take people through what I call an elevator pitch. It's a really simple framework that helps you describe any event, any ministry, any campaign in about 3 sentences so that people actually want to engage.
Let me go back on you on church, really kind of how it pertains to church announcements. Are we announcing too much? Do we, when we get on stage and host, are we saying 17 things and it barely hits one audience?
I think yes and no. I think churches make the same mistake that businesses make, and I've worked with hundreds of businesses over the years, and that is the mistake is they forget that the people they're talking to don't work there, right? So, like, they forget that the people in the pews aren't in their staff meetings, they're not in the planning meetings, they're not in the email threads, they're not in the hallway conversations about XYZ thing. So we oftentimes use insider language,
Right.
right? And then we forget they're here 3, maybe 4 times a month in this big event for an hour. Our emails are terrible, so I'm not reading those. They're bombarded with social media content. They're overwhelmed. And so I think first thing, we aren't remembering who our audience is. We're not speaking to the things through their lens. Second thing is, to your point, I do think sometimes we communicate too much, but it begins to feel like too much because we haven't paused and says, who are we actually talking to here?
Mm.
And then are we speaking directly to them? For example, I worked in churches for years, and I love to make fun of men's ministry events because they're the easiest ones to make fun of. Uh, but like, let's say, "Hey, men, come to Driven in 2 weeks. It'll be great." That is the least in compelling. You know what I mean? Like, do I want to give up half a Saturday for Driven? I don't even know what
Right.
Driven is.
Right.
What time is it? What are we doing? What are we talking about? There was one church I worked at where that was basically the pitch. "Hey, come do it. We're gonna have Chick-fil-A for breakfast and come and hear some speakers," was basically what was said. I'm like, that's no wonder we're gonna have low attendance. But the guy who spoke is now the COO of a $25 billion company, and he was brilliant. I mean, his content was so good. It was one of the few events I've ever been to where I still remember it 10 years later. Now, what we should have said was, "Hey, men, do you ever struggle? Do you feel like you're really confident in your work, but when you get home, you struggle to know how to lead your family well?" At this event, we're going to have this guy who's brilliant, this corporate guy who actually grew up in this church. He's going to come and he's going to walk us through some real world ways to lead well at work and at home so that you can feel like you're being more of who God's called you to be. Now, that's an event I want to go to,
Right.
right? So if I talk about stuff like that, now people are wanting to engage and be there.
Okay, let's step that up a notch and let's weave in visual media. If
Sure.
I were to show a video of that guy
Uh-huh.
with clips of him talking about how to manage church and ministry and family life, would that be even more compelling?
For sure. One of the things I do is with companies and like nonprofits is I say, let's get our words right. What are we trying to communicate here? And then a step further, oftentimes in my world, it comes into websites, print collateral, sales collateral, digital media, all video, all kind of stuff. And when we figure out what we're trying to communicate, it actually informs what we're trying to do visually. For example, I got a client they sell financial services to automotive companies. And they just did a couple of videos. And the videos were born out of, first, we needed to do this thing. Here's kind of our objective. The second thing was, what does the video need to look and feel and sound like? Well, who are we communicating to? What problem are we solving? How do we solve it? And then that informed everything about the video. So visually, I think it helps make our visuals better when we know what we're trying to communicate and who we're trying to communicate to.
So weave that in for a ministry leader.
Yeah.
What are some practical steps that they can improve their visual media content? Yes, but improve their messaging.
Yeah. Well, I'm biased. I mean, you may rumble over this. I think you got to start with the words shamelessly because
Oh, we're gonna throw down here.
listen, we're in Dallas. We may go old school wrestling here. I want
No, I think both are true. I mean, I think that we have to know those things because it
for sure.
informs the visuals. So we have to know our message, our audience, our all the kind of the basic story brand
Yeah.
stuff. You know, we're the hero, or they're the hero in the story, not us, right?
Yeah.
They're the Luke Skywalker. Like all that is classic story brand stuff. Where that messaging then informs the
Mhm.
content. And
Yeah.
by content, I mean text and
Visuals.
visuals.
Yeah. For example, like a lot of companies I work with will spend a ton of money on a very pretty website. Pretty websites don't actually do anything, right? They just look pretty on the internet.
Right.
It's kind of easy these days to look pretty on the internet. It's much harder to visually look great, but also try to communicate or actually effectively communicate the thing you're trying to engage. So, if I'm a church and I'm thinking a ministry leader visually, I always go back to, like this thing about events or giving campaigns. For example, I worked in a church years ago. We had to raise $100,000 for a new roof for one of our buildings. It was a 20-year roof that was 32 years old. So we were 12 years overdue on this new roof. We had gone up on the roof and counted. They had every time there was a leak, they would just patch it. The highest number, and they would number them. The highest number we could find was 256.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we hit $100,000 for the roof. That's like the least sexy thing you can raise money for in a church. It's not fun. It's not interesting. It's not exciting. The second problem was we were in the spring headed to summer, which is a natural slowdown in giving. Third problem was we were 6 months without a full-time senior pastor. So, churches just struggle in those seasons. But we had to do it because every time it rained now, our upstairs, which is our student ministry area, would flood. That causes
Yep.
you're mixing
Other problems.
mold.
Yep.
Water and electricity don't mix well. I mean, they do, but it's not a good thing.
Right.
And so we have to do a campaign to raise $100,000. And so somebody on staff said, "Hey, here's the shingle we're going to use. Here's the spec sheet for that shingle on the roof. Our county school system uses it. It's great. It's vetted. Let's show this on stage Sunday morning when we announce it." And I thought, "Hey, great. Thanks so much." I put it on my desk and never touched it again because nobody gives to a shingle. Nobody gives to the spec sheet of a shingle. What they give to and what they would engage with is a problem to solve. The problem wasn't the roof. The problem was because that roof was bad, we now have no space for our student ministry. Our student ministry was meeting in a fellowship hall, which that fellowship hall back then could seat 900 people at round tables. It was enormous, but it had purple carpet, had brass and gold decor with the giant old school Baptist banner, Jesus is Lord, Jehovah Jireh, with the fringe,
Yeah.
like 15 feet high. It was not the coolest place for middle and high school kids, as you can imagine. So it was hurting our student ministry. And so the problem to be solved was we need a space for our students to meet, for our student ministry staff to invest in them, for volunteers, because we want to invest in these young people so they can get fired up about their faith and then go back to their schools. Because we also figured out within a 15-minute drive of our church, there may be 30,000 kids between our middle and high schools in our area. We lived in a big area. And so that became it. So messaging wise, here's the problem to solve and here's how you can solve it by giving specifically to this campaign. Visually, we were as the first time I did it, I'm showing a video behind me of the numbered patches, and it ended on 256. And I said, "See that? We have 256 patches on that roof. Is that a good? No, that's not a great space." And then I introduced all the problems. So I always like to start with what are we trying to communicate and what problem are we trying to solve for our audience? And then how does that inform what we want to do visually?
How does a ministry leader look at it from that perspective to where the problem is not the roof, the problem is we don't have a space? How can we get them in a mindset
Yeah.
where, hang on, pastor, you're solving the wrong problem.
Yeah.
How do you switch their mindset?
Well, one way, this is when I work with companies, is what are the natural implications of this problem? So like if we don't fix the roof, well, what's the natural implication? There's no longer a student ministry space. That's just a natural next step. So you want to think beyond the initial issue You want to think, what is the natural implications of this problem? Like, what other problems does it create? And I'm frankly looking for what's the most painful or frustrating problem, right? My guess is from what you and I have interacted with, I know from you at Church Visuals, is that no, I don't guess there's a lot of ministry leaders who wake up and go, man, you know what the problem is? We don't have enough visuals. They might. The real problem is we feel like we're falling behind and not being as clear and engaging as we could be because our visuals are not very good, or we don't have the time or the internal expertise or the capacity to do it. Now all of a sudden I found a problem that they're
Right.
really feeling.
And I would take that a step further in that, like, the problem to solve is we want your community to come to know Jesus and grow
Yes.
in their faith.
Yep.
That's the problem. The problem isn't we don't look good,
Yeah.
right? I would say, like, as a company, we want to come alongside you and help you reach your community for Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, can we provide tools to help you, help your message get out there in a more
Right.
compelling way?
Yeah.
Um, so, so yeah, I mean, I would say that your visuals matter because the gospel matters, because the
Yes.
message matters,
Yeah.
not just because our secretary or our person is maxed out.
Yeah.
That's a problem,
For
yes.
sure.
Or like our stuff doesn't look that great on screen. Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But I would back it up a
Even
step
further. Yeah.
further
And
than that.
yeah, I oftentimes, if we're going to this problem thing, I look at what is the real issues? Like, what are even internally, what are those fears, frustrations, anxieties, concerns? So, a lot of churches will have either quarterly or maybe 2 or 3 times a year, a men's event, a women's event, etc. And our pitch becomes, hey, men, come to our breakfast. Hey, ladies, come to our brunch. And the men's breakfast is always either like the guy who was the long snapper for the University of Georgia Bulldogs in
Right.
1986, talking about teamwork and integrity and discipline,
Right.
or it's about hunting, or it's about don't be a pervert. And
Right.
and then the women's side is always, well, you're God's princess. It's like, that's not really solving a problem for me. It's like, instead, what's going on in the lives of our people
Mm.
that this is going to help them be a better mom, a better dad, a better husband, a better wife, a better leader, whatever it is. Right? What problem is it that we can solve for them and that this is going to engage them with? So then they can feel confident and clear to go out and do that.
All right, last question for you. What is something that you've seen in corporate spaces
Yeah.
that ministry needs to implement more?
How much time do we have? So I'm going to have two answers because I'm not good at picking one. One is a tactical one. And that is, I think churches need to double down on email marketing. The stats prove it over and over and over again on the corporate side. Email marketing is the number one way companies make money.
How many emails should I send a week?
At least one good one. I would focus on just sending one really good one every week. And by one good one, I mean pick a day and time that you can consistently hit and then decide what's the most important stuff that everybody in that church needs to know and get really good at that. And
How
that's it.
many things do I need to say in that?
I
One
would
call to action?
because that one you're kind of more like a traffic cop. So I might do 3 to 5 things. I'd have like, let's say you send in on Tuesdays, maybe have a quick sermon recap, 2 paragraphs, short paragraphs that AI can write for you, quite frankly. 2 paragraphs. And then I would say, hey, here's what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. And just remind people of things, 3 to 5 things, real short, clear calls to action. That's it. One email a week. You could get more segmented and people want to get all fancy pants. Man, just do one. Get really good at one first. That's first thing I would say. That's kind of tactics side. The second thing I would say is, I think when you prioritize clarity in how you communicate in all things, everything gets better. So I do StoryBrand, which is a storytelling framework I use with businesses based off a book, Building a Story Brand. And there was they did a study. StoryBrand did a study a few years ago, and they found that the companies that saw the greatest increases are the ones. The more you use StoryBrand, the more money you make, or the more you grow your nonprofit or whatever. And that's because when you prioritize clarity, more people are likely to engage. For example, we've all been in churches, somebody's going to announcement say, hey men, Driven is next weekend. If you want tickets, go see Jason at Information Station. What the heck is Driven?
Right.
Who is Jason? And where's Information Station? Or my favorite is, hey, high schoolers, come to Collide for Impact in the Attic. And you're like, why does it sound like I need a medical release form and a helmet for high schoolers? What they mean to say is, high school students, we meet upstairs on Wednesday nights at 6:30 for music and teaching and whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, use plain word. The more you prioritize clarity, the more people are going to engage. So I'd say first, tactically email marketing. The second thing is prioritize clarity through the eyes of your audience.
Yeah, good. Wes, been a pleasure, man. So you're the first interview that I've had today that used the word fancy pants in the interview. So thank you.
I'm only the first.
You're only the first.
I could have used all kinds of other phrases too if I need.
Yeah, only if you knew.
Listen, if I only knew, we'd go I like to wear my fancy pants. Only the best for MCL and church visuals.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
This has been a podcast presentation of Church Visuals. Executive produced by Carl Barnhill. Edited by Mario Franco. Title and show graphics by Angie Lomas. For more resources to help you visually communicate the gospel, visit churchvisuals.com.